Hi guys, thanks for clicking in. I'm Mike Outling coming to you from high atop our three-story walk-up. It seems I'm falling a little behind on my plan. My intention was for each episode of Mike's Bytes to be a little better than the one before. I learned something new about videography and I incorporate that in the next episode. Eventually my videos would be as polished and as smart looking as the channels that I've been watching that inspired me to do this. Committing to having something to present to the world every 2 weeks, I thought would motivate me to get it done. But that hasn't quite worked out this time. So, it's the story of my life, it seems. Life gets in the way. Well, work got in the way, and that's life. It was all working well and good during the lockdown. I had some work. People needed their essential stuff, but it wasn't as much as the regular stuff we were all getting. So I had a lot more time at home to do the things I like doing. And during my 2 weeks of quarantinecation, it was great. But business is picking up, and I'm back to my usual 8 to 18 hours behind the wheel. I like driving for a living because it gives me a lot of time alone to think about stuff. I actually believe the day you think you've run out of things to think about and you think you've got nothing to learn, well, that's the day you start the big slide into the great hereafter. So I'm going to try to avoid that for as long as I can, if you don't mind. But it takes a lot of hours behind the wheel to make enough money to pay the rent and buy the groceries. Driving gives me a lot of time to think about stuff, but it doesn't give me much time to do much else. It's a big reason why I'm looking forward to retirement. I'm looking for the time, I'll have the time to do something of all the stuff I've been thinking about. What and how exactly, I'm not sure yet, but I've been thinking YouTubing might be one way of doing all the things I enjoy doing together. Like traveling and being creative and learning about history and learning about all the little intricacies of the human interaction. And shoot my mouth off about stuff I think is important, even if I don't know all there is to know about it. But I know I'm getting older. There will probably come a time when the old body's going to look to the brain and say, "Hey, you keep thinking that, buddy. I got other plans." It's funny, and one of life's little ironies. The older you get, the more you look forward to what's coming. Sometimes for the better, and sometimes for the worse. Depends on who you are, I guess, and depends on what future you're looking at. But at the same time, the older you get, the more you think about what was and long to go back to those good old days. At least some of those days, at least for some of us. You need to remember, sometimes the past can look as bleak to some as the future looks to some others. The inspiration for this episode came from a Facebook friend. It was during an online discussion about how difficult it is for people to communicate different perspectives on social media without having to face some harsh criticism, and sometimes abusive criticism, if you ask me. He mentioned how people in his hometown used to gather around the kitchen table. He said they would disagree and bicker and squabble and argue, but when all was said and done, they went home still friends. And he thought perhaps it was time to go back to those old days. And I think he has a point. The idea triggered some memories of my own good old days around the table. He says, perhaps we do need to go forward by going back to a time when we could discuss our differences of opinions and accept they're just opinions. But just like we need to keep an open mind about the future, I think we need to be honest about our past too. Now, before I go any further, I think it's important to let you know that I consider myself a Canadian first and foremost. And I think a lot of Canadians feel that way. Not all, but a lot. And that's to be expected. And it's to be expected not all Canadians are going to see Canada the same way too. Actually, about the only thing we can say all Canadians have in common is that they call themselves Canadian. Well, almost all. Some of us do put something else of greater importance than being Canadian, like our region or our town or even our faith. And some of us feel the need to hyphenate our connection to Canada with the country they came from, or something else they or their ancestors felt was significant. And that's okay too. People need to feel they're unique. And this is one way we do it. I feel my heritage is too mixed to say I'm anything other than a Canadian. But like I said, we all see Canada differently. When I think of Canada, I see small towns and rural roads, big families and kids playing on the street, and places where everyone knew their neighbors by name, and everyone knew where your parents lived. I can tell you that from experience. That's what I see because that's what I saw when I was a kid, and this idea that I lived in a country called Canada first entered my thoughts. Whenever Nancy bakes bread, my thoughts go back to my grandparents' house in Dundas, Ontario, back in the early 60s. It says, and back then it was a small town just outside of Hamilton. It's bigger now. You know, this, I believe, was the soda shop my dad used to hang out at. And that was a real treat when I was a little one. When I got to hang along, because I got to play with the little mini jukeboxes at the table, and every once in a while somebody would give me a nickel, and I'd get to play a song, and everybody had to listen to it. In my memories of those old days, is the image of my grandfather in the kitchen baking bread. He used to work 5.5 days a week, and when he got home on Saturdays, it was the tradition for him to make bread and buns for everybody. It's about the only memory I have of him. And to be honest, I'm not sure if that memory is real or something conjured up in my subconscious out of all the things people used to talk about when I was too young to tell the difference between reality and imagination. For me, childhood memories are more like a series of short video clips than a long-running movie. And I've concluded those little snippets to remember are important because they mark a moment when we learn something significant or we experience something we're still dealing with today. One clip that keeps playing over in my mind's eye is at the big table in my grandparents' dining room. Around it, every supper time, the family would squeeze into their spots at the table. It was a big table. It was a big family. And the table would be heaping with food. And everyone was expected to take a little bit off the table and eat everything on their plate. And that was the rule. And if someone stopped by the house, which seemed quite often actually, they were invited and even expected to take a seat at the table, and we'd all squeeze in a little tighter. And that shouldn't be surprising, because if it's how things were braggers, we'd be telling you we were fantastic cooks. Now, around the table, the conversation was often loud and jocular, and sometimes a little biting, but I don't recall ever getting too serious. And that's a tradition we still hold today whenever the clan gets together. I remember one time, my cousin, she was brought to tears. Pumpkin pie was the dessert, and she didn't like pumpkin pie. But one of her uncles told her, "Eat your squash pie, it'll put hair on your chest." Well, that tears started flying. "I don't want hair on my chest, I don't like pumpkin pie." Everybody broke out laughing until they realized that she wasn't. And then we'd gather around and they yelled, "It's okay, we're just kidding, it's okay. It says, I think it was all in jest, I'm sure. I don't think my uncles meant any harm from it. And so, but to this day, I bet my cousin still won't eat squash pie. And afterwards, my cousins and I would go play out in the street until the street lights came on, and we'd hear a female voice, I'm not sure who, says to call us to come back inside. Those were my good old days. And from a kid's perspective, they're probably as good as they get. At least that was as good as it got for me, anyways. For me, that table in my grandparents' house represents what Canada was. A land of plenty where everyone was welcome to join in the bounty and spirited camaraderie. This is, like a big family. But was that real, or was it just how I remember it? The reason I don't have many memories of my grandfather was because during that time, he was up alone in his room, in a lot of pain, slowly dying from leukemia. So we dealt with things like that those days. And nobody talked about it. He's not around as kids. And one time I tried to sneak up and see him, but I got sidetracked by an adult. Go on, go back down. You don't need to see him. And sometimes the conversation may have been lively, but there were some things we just didn't talk about. And there were some things my elders did talk about, like those others, that wouldn't be so light-hearted today, at least not around my table. And it's an uncomfortable truth. And it may be why I don't remember too much about it. But for what I learned from our history as a nation, I'm fairly sure my family has some very biased opinions. This is like most families, and some of us still do. And judging by how some peoples are now starting to tell their stories, not everyone had a seat at the table or was even invited. It's easy to feel good about ourselves and how tolerant and inclusive we were, as long as those others we consider are one of us and not one of them. And perhaps the reason the conversation really got too critical or abusive back then was because we knew if we went too far, someone would belt us in the mouth. There was an etiquette involved even amongst us working classes. It seems some of us have forgotten, or never were taught, it's not so much what you say, but how you say it. And because we don't always know how to say it in writing, and people will assign whatever context they want to it rather than the context we want to give it, it's easy to get offended by an offhanded comment, or with an attempt at a joke, or just a difference of opinion. And that's something we've yet to develop in this new age of social media. After all, social media, in my opinion, is the new kitchen table. At least for me, it is. When I have the time, my morning coffee on the balcony is followed up with another coffee as I scroll through comments and posts made by people on social media. And sometimes I can give a response or I offer up something I think people might want to hear or see. So just like we used to in person around the table. And perhaps it's even better this way. My virtual table now includes people from all around the world that I would never have encountered any other way. And to be frank, from segments of society who would never have bothered to start a conversation with me, nor I them. And I think that's a good thing. At least it could be a good thing. It can be a real eye-opener and a chance to broaden your horizons without having to leave the comfort of your own home. The past is the past for sure, but the past is important too, I believe. The better we understand how we got to this present helps us understand why we see the world the way we do. And that determines how we'll approach the future, for better or worse. I don't have much time or even opportunity to sit down face to face with my friends and neighbors. This is our dining room. It's my office, yeah, and my video studio. And this is our kitchen table, aka Nancy's Craft Center. It's just the two of us, Nancy and I, and the psycho puppies. And after 8 to 18 hours a day on the road, I'm quite content for it to be that way. Although we still feel part of our bigger families. We just get together less often than we used to. And knowing our families, that might be a good thing. But the spirit of conversation around tables of pennies is still there when we do get together. And sometimes the conversation is jocular, and sometimes it's biting, but it's never too serious. And on a side note, it's interesting when the conversation goes around to our past, like our earliest memories. What we remember and what our cousins remember are often two different things, very different things. So perhaps it's time we do move forward by going back to gather around the kitchen table, but a bigger table where everyone is welcome to join in. Not just the yeses, but the thems too. Because if there's one thing I have learned from all the different people I've encountered during all my hours on the road, is that no matter how different we may appear to be, when it comes to the things that really matter, we pretty much see the same thing. Those core values we often talk about are core values because they're something all humans share, even if we see them differently. The rest are just matters of opinion. After all, family as much as an idea is a genetic connection. And shouldn't that be what Canada is all about? So has social media become your new kitchen table? And is that a good or a bad thing? Please enter your thoughts in the comments. And if you like this, please hit the like button. And if you didn't, hit the like button anyways. I need all the help I can get. Now, I may not be able to see you in 2 weeks. Like I said, business is picking up, and I expect June to be a rather busy month. A lot of hours on the road. But I'll get back to you as soon as I can. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great day, everyone. Now go be the heroes of your own stories. Mikey out.